This is the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast, session number 238. Dr. Tracy Riley on taking off.
Welcome to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast with Jason Linett, your professional resource for hypnosis training and outstanding business success. Here's your host, Jason Linett.
Welcome back to the program, and a welcome back to Dr. Tracy Riley, who's here on the podcast for the second time. Actually, I believe almost 1 year exactly to the date, and talking about a number of themes, some things that I've seen she's been up to over the last year, and wanting to share that story and some tips and tricks and tools you can put into use within your own business, your own practice as well. So this is going to be a wide-reaching conversation that we're going to talk about just simply the things that have been in motion to take her already successful business working as a hypnotist and really helping it to, well, take off in brand new directions, looking at some of the tested and proven principles that are out there and putting her own unique spin in terms of getting out there, and whether it's doing networking, whether it's doing talks at local community events, and even looking at that ability to create your own signature sort of, routine, your own process that you put out there, and that unique ability that, depending on the audience in front of us, that's how we can then change that program up and then make it something that's very valuable for those people in front of us, even for across different audiences that are out there. Which, take note, when we start to talk about building a presentation to become a part of your local community, take note that she says, I wasn't going in and offering a 30-minute talk on hypnosis. That little nugget of wisdom alone is massive, that I keep having people who even pop up in my online community, my Hypnotic Business Systems group, and they'd often say, is like, yeah, but they don't want to talk on hypnosis. And I'll tell you, it's not because they are against it. It's because they don't yet know that they need it. That's that missing element. So to go in, as Tracy's talking about building, as she puts it, killer confidence, having something that actually presents value, teaches them something, gives them a unique experience, and then from there, it's a natural pivot to go, here's how we can work together. We're also going to spend quite a bit of time talking about something that Tracy's a bit of an expert in helping people to release, and that's grief. So looking at some of the misconceptions that people would often have around it, looking at even an aspect of it that I had not considered. But as we had the conversation, I'm thinking back to so many clients that to have this knowledge of what's called survivor's guilt going into that process, to look at that as something specifically that needs to be addressed, and using that as a catalyst for change, as well as getting into some of the specific tools of helping to make that happen. And yes, the reiteration over and over of the phrase, stop putting on your pants. Well, listen to the audio of this conversation to really figure out what that means. If you are listening to this on Thursday morning, on the 17th of October, when this launches, stop everything, book your plane tickets, and join us both, plus many other amazing people, at the Mid-America Hypnosis Conference up in the Chicago area. Chances are most of you will be listening to this after that event, so stay tuned to that Mid-America Conference website to get all the details for the 2020 event, which I'm sure I'll be back once at again. So on that too, we talk about business while you're online. Check out Tracy's website, tracyriley.com. Links over in the show notes at worksmarthypnosis.com. Plus, check out hypnoticbusinesssystems.com, which I share a bit of a personal anecdote, quoting a conversation that actually Tracy and I had a while ago, which was that she goes, I was talking to someone who was kind of struggling within the business, and they go, I tried this, and it didn't work. And Tracy's line, not just for hype back to me, was to go, well, I've just done what Jason said to do and it worked. But the main thing was I didn't make the excuses as to why I didn't do it. So it's where I love the nuance in our conversation where she goes, there's a few things I did badly, and we come around to the phrase that it only brought in a few clients rather than a lot of clients. But again, I'd be very open right now that here we are, it's October 2019. And as much as in Hypnotic Business Systems, I'm teaching, here's the campaigning that I do online to bring in clients. Here's the social media placement. Here's the search engine optimization. Here's the way that I've built my programs when I go out there. Here's the way that I've done group sessions to earn money while I'm promoting my own business. And as much as that's what built the business, the ultimate goal is to get to that place where, kind of where I am right now, most everything is coming in by way of referral. But even with that, you got to have some systems to make that work. So check out hypnoticbusinesssystems.com. Get the all access pass, which on top of all the online education, it's a thriving online community where there's people there to answer your questions as well. And with that, let's jump directly into this week's content. Here we go. Second time in the program, session number 238, Dr. Tracy Riley on taking off. So Tracy, back on the program now for the second time, and just kind of kicking off, what's new?
There is so much going on in the last year. I think we were just talking, it's been a year since I've been on the program with you, and my practice has exploded. My
in the good
life
way, right?
has kind of exploded as well. Yes, all in good ways.
Okay, good. Yeah, because
all in good ways. Yeah, I guess I should say it's taken off.
There
not
we go. That's
exploded.
better. Yeah.
Yeah, a little reframe there. It has taken off in very positive, healthy, good ways.
Yeah, and what would you kind of account to what's been making that happen?
You know, I kind of like the phrase of Nike of just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've done. I've just done it. I took a lot of your tools, techniques, recommendations from WorkSmart Hypnosis, and I just started implementing them. And some of them were my biggest assets, and some of them I did a horrible job at. And they still worked. They just didn't work the way I wanted them to. But I did everything you said to do. You know, go Jason.
Thank you.
So that's what I've done.
Well, maybe this is a conversation we kind of branch off a bit from, which is that, you know, I tend to build the dialogue even in my office that, you know, in terms of the process, that it's not a matter of it worked or it didn't work. It's always looking at everything as if it were a tool. And it's only as good as we can put it into use, which as soon as we start to get into that dialogue, let's say even with our clients, it's not a matter of what we did last time didn't work. It's instead, here's how we worked that process together to get that in motion. And even to look at the business side, you know, we can even, I love that phrase of, you know, some things weren't done as well as they could have been, but still
Right.
That was getting your messaging out there. And maybe it didn't bring in as many people as it could have, yet it still worked enough that it's like, well, that was good enough.
Right. There's no failure. There's only feedback.
You know, you
I've
should
heard
write that down. Is
somewhere.
that yours?
You know, I can't. It's not mine. I can't remember where I heard that before. Probably Jason Lynette. It's definitely applicable.
It goes back further. Yeah.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of if you can kind of isolate one of those things that, you know, to look back and like some of those things you've implemented, what have they been?
I started doing networking groups. I started doing Rotary talks. I did another one this week. I started doing, putting a lot of emphasis on the website. I started doing some social media marketing. This year I have taught 6 classes already. So I'm putting myself out there more, just getting the exposure and building the know, like, trust that you talk about.
Yeah. So let's look at, and it was you putting up the photo of the Rotary group, which we may swipe that from Facebook and make that the podcast cover this week. Surprise. But it was actually that photo that I go, oh, we need to get Tracy back in the program and talk about some of the stuff that you've been doing. What's been that approach of doing that presentation?
What I did this time was a program called Killer Confidence, 6 Minutes to Success.
Nice.
Because, of course, with Rotary, you're talking to business owners and entrepreneurs in the community. So I'm not going to go in there and talk about a full 30 minutes of hypnosis because that's not necessarily going to benefit them. But what I did do was I gave them some content of things that they could do to build their business and improve their confidence. And then I showed them Dan Candel's 2-minute transformation or the mental stretch, and then showed them how that relates to hypnosis and really got their attention. I had 15 minutes to do all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took another presentation I had done last year for a television station and took that hour presentation and chopped that into 15 minutes. And it was amazing. It was phenomenal. I got so much positive feedback from that. And so you learn how to cater to the audience that you're speaking to. And I literally had 3 days notice that I was doing this.
Nice.
Yeah.
What's cool about that is, again, looking at, you know, be the expert, not the vendor, be the peer rather than the person trying to sell them something. That, you know, going in and, you know, the mindset of what can I give them which, to look at, give them the experience. I know it's just recently. Can you talk in any length in terms of what result you've seen from doing that, or even from other events like this?
What always happens is people are interested. You get that handful of people that want to come up and talk to you. So I always make sure that I've got extra time to stick around for the rest of their meeting, even though it's not applicable to me at the moment. But I stuck around. I got booked for another meeting for the Women's Chamber of Commerce. They want me to do a presentation next month, so I got booked for that. There's a local community event going on in a couple of weeks, and a local DJ was there as well. He's a member of the Rotary. So that one 15-minute presentation has already snowballed into other ways that I can plug myself into the community and get the awareness out. And of course, I'm not just talking hypnosis. I'm talking mental health because, as we know, mental health matters.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's the willingness to sometimes do things that we can't directly financially track that really sets things off.
Right. Yeah, for that particular meeting, there was no financial gain. But typically when I do these meetings where I'm giving a presentation, at some point I will always get 1 to 2 patients or clients or individuals coming to me, and then that always leads to referrals. Mm-hmm. So it may not be that I get them this week, it may be 2 or 3 months, but every time I do these presentations, someone or 2 people or 3 people will eventually trickle in.
Yeah. No, I can flash back to the Rotary group that's actually my office that I moved into back in May. It was actually 10 years ago or so that I did a talk at the Rotary group that's now, I can see the venue from my office practically. And I did that one back then. And, I left the meeting and the mistake was, oh, that didn't go well. No one booked with me. Yet over the course of the next 3 months, here were 6 people who came in from that group, which led to a couple of dozen more referrals over the year. That was back when I was also doing some of the stage hypnosis, and that led into Interact, which is the high school version of Rotary in terms of a fundraiser program. And to look at all these things that came in, and I flashed back to another moment, which was that here was a local chapter that was only 4 people, which the first thought was, really? But to find out these 4 guys were like the ultimate of connectors, which I can track a major newspaper interview that I had back to that meeting, which then that led to so many other aspects of things. So again, that willingness that it's okay that we don't see that immediate return, because it's not just about who's in the room, it's about who do those people know.
Right. I actually had a consultation this week with another licensed clinical social worker and one about 3 weeks ago, and both of them said they had met me 8 to 10 years ago at a hospital training I did. And of course, I have no memory of either of them.
Do you have those moments where you have to pause and think, are you sure it was me?
I did say that. I was like, really? I don't remember that. But yeah, I had 2 people in the last month remember me from 8 or 10 years ago at a hospital training I did, which doesn't make me feel old at all that I've been doing this for so long or in the mental health field. But so people they do remember you. Even if they don't come right away, they do start to remember you and you build that reputation. So it's all about getting your name out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which also being out in the community and doing some of the workshops that you've been doing. Can you chat about that for a bit?
Yes, I did 2 in Vegas this year at HypnoThoughts. So that was a huge honor for me because I just started going to HypnoThoughts 2 years ago. And then to put in for presentations, both a pre-conference course and then a breakout session and get selected for both of those, that was a huge honor. So I was very grateful to Richard Clark and Scott Sandlin and the ones that make those decisions because, they're taking a chance on kind of a newbie to that arena. So I felt like that was just like a huge honor. And I'm at the cool kids table now. So that was amazing. I got to participate in that. And then I did 2 sessions at the end of August here a little more locally, about 2.5 hours from where I live in Orlando for foster care kids, which is always my passion because I aged out of the foster care system. So I did a presentation for foster care kids, also Killer Confidence, 6 Minutes to Success. That was an hour-long presentation. I kind of have different versions of that one. And I did another session for individuals who work with foster care kids on talking to them about grief and loss and the things that foster care kids go through when they've had a major tragedy and loss in their life. So those are always fun to do, even though I go to those conferences and I don't know anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like I go to a hypnosis conference and I know everyone. So it's like, this is a lot of fun. These are my friends. And then I go to these mental health conferences where I'm like, I feel like such the odd man out because I'm like, where are my hypnosis friends? They're not here.
See, still to this day, I'm guilty of like going into the hotel for something and assuming everybody's there for the same event that I'm for. You know,
Right.
we had a really good turnout for the first ICBCH Winter Hypnosis Conference this year in 2019 and doing it again in
Yes.
February 2020. And, you know, for that event, it's not the 1,000 people for HypnoThoughts. It's still a decent 150 to 200. And yeah, walking around, it's like, oh, that person's, no, wait, that's a smaller event. Yes. Or the same as
Yeah.
we'll both be. We're recording this the same week it's going out for Mid-America Hypnosis Conference this week on Friday. So if you're listening on Thursday, as this launches, book your plane ticket, come hang out in about 6 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but to look at how, you know, bringing that message in. But I love something that you brought up there, that you did Killer Confidence at the Rotary Talk, but then also looking at it, let's say, as a template, as a system, and being able to bring that core message to another audience.
Yes, I have Killer Confidence, 6 Minutes to Success. I've done that for a local television station, a television sales group. I did that for a group of foster care kids, and I did that for the Rotary group this week. So I've put it in a 15-minute format. I've put it in a 45-minute format. I've put it in a 60-minute format. So I can definitely take all the presentations I've put together and change it based on the audience in front of me.
Yeah, which that right there is a system that, as I've spent more time in the info marketing world, in terms of, you know, the people who are not talking, let's call it out, the people who are not talking about how amazing it may be to book single sessions that are like 300, even upwards of 400 or 500, but instead the communities where they're launching programs for like $5,000 in a minimum and selling millions of it around the world. And that's a consistent formula of figuring out what is my core message. And it's a little twist on the marketing that, you know, we would say niche it down as specifically as you can. But let's say here's self-publishingschool.com. That's the group who's they put together a 90-day program that I expertly did in 9 months.
Right.
And that's how I put the book out earlier this year. But to look at what they did, Chandler Bolt with that group, they have a core process of here's how to write, here's how to publish, here's how to launch the book. But in their marketing, it's specifically designed upon who's the audience that's in front of them. So the same way that I can kind of chunk it down nowadays and say, here's my process for public speaking. But again, the messaging, the story around it is going to be different based on if I'm talking to educators, if I'm talking to internet marketers, if I'm talking to entrepreneurs. So to have that core process and recognize just by the framing, we can make it specific for those people in front of us.
Right. And, you know, public speaking is probably one of the biggest fears that most people have, even if they've done it a whole lot, or definitely if they've never done it. And I remember when I went to HypnoThoughts the very first time, I actually signed up for your post-conference class before I even signed up for HypnoThoughts. So I knew I was coming to your class no matter what. And I remember we had to do introductions, of course. And I remember doing my introduction. You probably don't remember this, but I remember doing it, and my voice cracked the entire time. I sounded like I was going to cry the entire time. And I'm like, this is so ridiculous. Like, I cannot believe I sound like this.
Which let's cut to the audio of that right now. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
You probably should. It would be hilarious, because now here I am, and 2 years later, yes, but within a year, I'm starting to travel around the country. I'm giving presentations. I'm in front of groups. And I'm like, wow, how did this happen? And it's happened because I built my confidence first, and then hypnosis. And I took classes with Rick Green, who did a confidence class.
Yeah.
I did hypnosis with him. And so I started doing things myself that I wanted to project and to show other people and then to teach other people.
I love that as the mindset that, here's how I can do it myself as the model, and to have gone through it yourself and then be able to help others create that.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about Mid-America this week because I was asked to teach 2 classes this week. So I'll be presenting again to, this time more specifically to hypnotists. And I think you said this was going to be like a little smaller group, so a little bit more intimate setting, not quite as big as Hypno Thoughts. It's my first time to go to Mid-America, and I typically don't travel alone. So this will be my first event where I'm actually all alone. So I'm like really putting on my big girl pants and talk about getting out of your comfort zone. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be super exciting for me.
Which, yeah, and one of the things I wanted to have you on here to chat about was that I know you do a number of workshops specifically on talking about grief.
Yes.
Yeah. What, if you had to kind of break it down to a few points, what do you think would be some of those misconceptions that people would often have in terms of approaching grief as a subject?
We suck at grief as a society. We suck at death, at dying, at grief. We don't like to sit with pain and despair. We feel like other people's pain makes us uncomfortable, and we don't like to see people hurt. And we really don't like to deal with other people's guilt. So there are times when we can allow people some grief because we understand it a little bit. But when you move into the guilt, that's when, as a society, we really try to push away guilt for other people. Now, we'll accept our own guilt and wallow in it, but we don't like other people to have guilt. So what I'm talking about this week at Mid-America is survivor's guilt, and how survivor's guilt, it used to be its own diagnosis in the diagnostic and statistical manual that mental health clinicians go by. It used to be its own standalone diagnosis. Now it is a component of post-traumatic stress disorder. So what I'm talking about to hypnotists is how they can take someone who's experiencing all of these feelings of guilt, specifically survivor's guilt, and help them deal with those emotions that go along with it, those behaviors and those symptoms, and kind of package it all up and tuck it away. Obviously, we can't undo what's happened to get them there, but as a society, our friends, our family, we don't deal well with grief. We don't deal well with guilt. And when someone reaches out to us as a clinician or a hypnotist, we need to have the tools to help them, because most likely friends and family has failed them to that point.
Which, I mean, to go back to the conversation of PTSD, there's also the bigger conversation that, part of the expectation would be, oh, that's going to be the veteran who's come in from some, wartime experience. That's going to be some catastrophic event. But that definition has been expanding, where it might be getting laid off from the job, something in the relationship. Are there aspects of grief when we're talking about it from whether it's the survivor's guilt or any other aspect of grief where we're realizing that grief is going to be a component of issues we didn't expect it was going to be a part of?
It happens all the time. Grief can be, of course, we automatically think of death or dying.
Yeah.
But grief is also divorce. Grief is job loss. Grief is infertility issues. Grief can be so many things that we don't necessarily think of until it happens to us. Survivor's guilt can be, I was in a car accident and I survived, but my spouse didn't, or my child didn't. It can be something as things we don't think about. I was doing drugs and my friend overdosed and I watched my friend die. I mean, these are horrific examples, but examples that I have dealt with in my practice. So there are so many different things. And like you said, the umbrella of post-traumatic stress disorder has broadened so much that just about anything will now fit that criteria.
So in your world, are people coming to you because of the grief, or is the grief something that ends up being addressed as part of what they're actually coming in for?
Usually people are coming in because they're angry or they're irritable, or they can't get along with other people.
The hell's
Maybe
that
their
supposed to mean, Tracy?
Right, exactly.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got an appointment scheduled for you, Jason. So, a lot of times their employer will call and say this person has to come in because they can't get along with their coworkers. And so they're coming in because of a set of symptoms. And then when I sit down with someone and we unpack everything that's been going on with them, it's like, oh, this is why you're feeling this way. So when someone comes in to see me, I always start with, where have you been? And where are you now? And where do you want to go? And so once I find out where they've been and where they are, then I can get them where they want to go. But usually what happens is when I find out where they've been, I find out all the stuff that's happened to them, that there's so much unresolved grief and guilt that they're stuck. And my role is to get them unstuck and get them moving back on the path to get them where they want to be, towards happiness and peace and relaxation and feelings of calm and comfort.
Which you may be hinting towards this next question, which is that, what are those tools that you're making use of in order to help them out?
I always recommend hypnosis because that, I think, is one of the best tools that I have.
But you can't come on a hypnosis podcast and just go, oh, I use hypnosis. Let's get specific.
Right. Well, one of the tools that I do is...
And don't say suggestion.
Is the other class that I'm teaching this week at Mid-America Conference. Is called Stop Putting on Your Pants. And this is a technique I learned about 8 years ago here in Florida. It's called Stop Putting on Your Pants, which you do have to wear your pants when you do this technique. So that's one of the specific things that I do. I also do...
Could you give like a brief overview of what that is?
So I describe it as kind of installing an app into the mind, because we all have our smartphones and we have apps on our phones. So I describe it as we're just going to install this app into our minds. It's not anything that we don't already know logically. It's this repetition game of getting the mind to accept and fully understand that what happened isn't happening now. Because that's what trauma is, and that's when we relive it. We think that what happened a long time ago is happening right now. So Stop Putting on Your Pants is actually, it's a funny game that I play with people. They're laughing and they're thinking I'm being silly, but it's getting that app installed in their mind that what happened a long time ago isn't happening right now. Mm-hmm. And it clicks in the mind, and you can see the relief come into them when it clicks, and they're like, oh yeah, I did something this morning that I'm not doing right now. And that thing that happened all those years ago isn't happening right now. And it merges the two, and it makes sense for them.
Yeah. When you say there's repetition, is it like a phrase? Is it a suggestion?
Yes. It's one phrase that we repeat a lot, and then we kind of bring in some other phrases. So Stop Putting on Your Pants gets said a lot. So I use this with people, and then like maybe I'll see them a few weeks later, or I'll even call them on the phone, and I'll be like, hey, John, stop putting on your pants. And, they'll just, he'll just start laughing, or she'll start laughing, because they know exactly what that means. And the subconscious mind knows exactly what that means when I say, hey, stop putting on your pants. Because literally, I'm not talking about this morning when you put on your pants. I'm talking about that thing that happened a long time ago that's not happening anymore. And then it's like, oh yeah, that's just data. That's just information. That's not actually happening right now.
Yeah, I'd give a preview that, not this week, of course, because you're on the podcast this week, but next week on the podcast, we've already recorded with Brett Cameron, who's out of Australia. And he talks about the phrase, I believe, if I remember it right, here at next week, of just this brain is having a thought. Which is that wonderful dissociative thing that, no, I'm not that thought, that the brain is creating that thought. I'm not the reaction to it. Or to go back to the work of Mickey Mongan, the founder of hypnobirthing. And I think it was either her quote or she was quoting someone else. And I use this phrase with client that some of the happiest people in the world are completely out of their minds. That they're not thinking it through and overanalyzing it. They're just in the experience and observing it rather than looking at it and judging it. the same as a lot of the work that Jürgen Rasmussen does in the psychological illusion model, that again, that thought is not who that person is. That thought is not what happened. It's the reflection. So to look at, as much as some have put down affirmations, it's like, no, we're creating an anchor to completely disconnect from that problem state. Is there a story you can share of, using some of that with somebody and seeing a great result?
I have a lady that I've been seeing for traditional counseling probably the better part of a year, and she came to me because of a horrible relationship that she had with her mother growing up. This lady is probably in her 50s, mom is in her 70s, and she has, through years of therapy with other people, she's managed to give some excellent boundaries with mom. So she's in a very good place with her current relationship with mom. She puts boundaries in place. She doesn't let mom push her buttons anymore. So she's been able to get to a really good place with mom now. But yet some of those things that happened with mom through the years was continuing to play in her mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so one day we were talking about that, and I went through the Stop Putting on Your Pants game with her. I call it a game, installing an app. Now, this is what I kind of call waking hypnosis, because she didn't close her eyes. She definitely didn't cluck like a chicken. She and I were looking at each other and talking and laughing the whole time. And there's always this moment where the person knows it's done and it's clicked and it's happened. And she was doing, we were going through it, and she stopped talking and she looked up and she goes, "It just left me." And I was like, "What? What do you mean?" She goes, "It just left. It physically left my body. That feeling, that heaviness, that junk of all those things my mother did all of those years just physically left my body." And she was looking up in the ceiling going, "Do you see it? Because I felt it leave." I mean, she's not delusional or anything. She's not like having a hallucination that there's something floating around in the ceiling, but she's like, "I just physically felt it leave my body." So about 2 weeks later, she was back, and she said, "I've been waiting for that feeling to come back, and it's not back. Like, it's gone. That feeling is gone. Whatever we did," and I'm like, "You were right there with me. You know exactly what we did." And she's like, yeah. Whatever we did, it worked, because that feeling is gone, and I feel so much better now. And I get that kind of reaction and response with probably 95% of the people that I do this with.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's about creating that, I'd imagine, just creating that interrupt and then using that as the transition. How are you making that decision these days? Because I know, correct me on the exact title, because you did get the doctorate as a psychologist. What are you in that role as well as the hypnotist?
It's a little interesting with the state of Florida and the way the licensing is set up. I cannot call myself a psychologist because I'm not licensed as a psychologist. So I do have a doctorate in psychology. I've been licensed as a social worker for over 10 years. And then, of course, I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist. So I just like to say, "Hey, I'm Tracy." I try not to get caught up in all of that. When I introduce myself, I still say I'm Tracy Riley. And then I go, "Oh, yeah, wait, I'm a doctor, too. I'm supposed to say that." But I forget a lot that I've got all of these titles. And I just go with, "Hey, I'm Tracy. You can trust me."
Although I must point out that we're recording this the morning of the last day of my Work Smart Hypnosis live class. And for what it's worth, this is the first time in a long while that I haven't had to print that, end of the class certificate with somebody that had to go to 2 lines for all the letters at the end of the name. When there's 16 characters after your name, maybe you're trying to prove something. And just putting that out there.
Right.
If you look at the stuff I'm putting out nowadays, in most cases, it's Jason Lynette. I'm not putting all the extra, stuff at the end of it. The question back to, how are you making that decision in terms of what route you go with somebody, or are you kind of doing a bit of an integrative blend of the two these days?
I will do an integrated blend of the two. I also will give the person that's coming to see me some choice. The people that I see for traditional counseling, I will typically offer them the option to do hypnosis. I do have a hypnotist that comes into my office every month for about a week at a time. And usually I will offer them to meet with him as a consultation and see if they want to work with him separately for hypnosis aside from the counseling, because I do like to kind of keep that separate. If I'm seeing someone for counseling, I don't want to also do hypnosis with them. If someone calls in and they haven't been seeing me for traditional counseling, then I will bring them in, meet with them, and do a consultation. Maybe I'll do it on the phone, maybe I'll do it in office, and get an idea of where they've been, where they are, where they want to go, and then kind of map out a treatment plan that's going to work for them. So everything is customized and individualized based on who's sitting in front of me.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a reason why you're not wanting to blend, if you're seeing them for counseling, to then, if I'm hearing that right, you're then pivoting to someone else within your practice for the hypnosis?
I do. I like the differentiation, and also because insurance doesn't pay for hypnosis, and so it becomes a little bit of I feel like a little bit like a used car salesman going, I know your insurance is paying for this, but if you really want to do hypnosis,
I can see that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to have to charge you this. And then I feel like, okay, I'm charging them all this money. I know it's going to work, but then I just feel like that used car salesman if I'm trying to upsell them on something. And it's just easier in my mind to keep that separation and let them see someone else and make a different decision.
Yeah, I can hear you on that. I mean, it's where even from launching, Virginia Hypnosis years ago, the first intention was that the actual office, the actual time in the space is going to be a no sales environment. So,
right.
Respectfully charging enough that if I'm going to be producing a custom audio for someone or sharing something I've already got, or giving them even a module of some online training to say, here's this as a demo, you can go along with it, not to then pivot and go, but that's going to be an extra $45 or that's going to be an extra $300. And this is why from the start that it's not, yes, there's financial benefit. Yes, there's cash flow benefit of the fact that my people prepay in advance. But the real benefit of that is now, as soon as they're in the space, that becomes 100% the focus, that I'm not wanting to, and calling it out without ego of someone who knows how to sell things rather well. But in that space, that's not where we do that.
Exactly. And I want my office space to be a therapeutic space where they're focused only on improving themselves and being well and healthy, and not, is she going to try to sell me something else? Because I don't ever want to feel like, I'm a social worker. I do outreach. I don't do sales. So it just made more sense from a business model for me to bring in a hypnotist from another area. And he's not even here every day. So it makes sense to say, I've got this guy, he's here once a month. Why don't I set you up to meet with him? And he can walk you through maybe some different options that we haven't explored together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Outstanding. Hey, before we wrap things up here, where can people find you online? How can they reach out to you?
I have a website, tracyriley.com.
Nice. And give us the spelling. We'll put it in the show notes, but give the spelling so people get it right.
Right, because there's a million ways to spell both of those names. It's TracyRiley.
Outstanding. And before we wrap up, any final thoughts for the listeners out there?
I am just thrilled to be a part of this community. Hypnotists are some of the best people that I've met, and I've met a lot of mental health clinicians. So I think mental health clinicians really need to step up our game as far as how we communicate and get along with other people, because hypnotists are some of the best, friendliest people that I've ever met. So if you get a chance to hang out with a hypnotist, I think you should do it.
Jason Linett here once again, and as always, thank you so much for interacting with this program, leaving your reviews online. And by the way, nice little surprise the other day. I looked at the Amazon listing for Work Smart Business, the book I put out in January 2019, earlier this year. And as of today, 72 reviews. For what it's worth, not to crack the slightly dirty joke, it kind of locked off at 69 for quite a while. and now we're at 72. So we'll take that, and looking forward to hopefully getting that to 100. So if you've picked up that book, if you've read it, hop over to Amazon and leave your review. If you haven't yet picked it up, it's rather affordable online over on Amazon.com as well. Or just as a side note, for most folks who pick up the All Access Pass to HypnoticBusinessSystems.com or even HypnoticWorkers.com, very often, just as a thank you, I send you a signed copy of Work Smart Business in the mail, just as a thanks for joining that online community. So check either of those out, HypnoticBusinessSystems.com or HypnoticWorkers.com. Either way, look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast at WorkSmartHypnosis.com.
Hey, it's Jason here, and I want you to be the first to find out as we upload new content here online. So do this right now. Click subscribe right next to this video, and you will be the first to find out as I share further resources, further downloads, and other really cool things to come your way. See you soon.